Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today, the co-host, Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Well, good. We have a very interesting program for today. We're going to be involved in politics. Can you believe that? Because we're not politicians, we're interested in the issues. But the guest we have is also interested in the issues, too. And our guest today is Dr. Kelli Ward. And she's running against somebody that's pretty well known. But I think the way Kelli's working at it, she's getting as well known, at least in Arizona, as her opponent. Of course, she's running against somebody by the name of McCain. And she's doing quite well. I don't think anybody expected her to do quite this well. So, Kelli, it's real nice to have you with us today.
Hey, it's great to be here with you, Dr. Paul. Thank you. And I will have to tell you, I got to tell you a little story because I'm not sure you remember. I ate breakfast with you at LPAC, and you got up on that stage and said, there's a young lady down here at my table, and I'm going to convince her to run against John McCain. Well, here we are.
Well, I remember that. Now you put it together for me. So that's pretty neat. So if you get tired and annoyed by it, you can always blame me for it, right? So I want to mention...
When we retire and we'll be happy. The world will be a better place.
I want to mention a little bit. It's listed here that you were born in Fairmont, West Virginia, and I think Fairmont, West Virginia is not too far from Pittsburgh, if I'm not mistaken, where I am from. And also you got one of your degrees from Duke University, and I spent a few years there. But you got a BS in psychology at Duke, but then you went on and got your medical degree, and then you got literally involved personally in politics in 2012. First time you went out, you won a Senate seat. That was a state Senate seat. And the next time you didn't even have an opponent. So maybe you'll do the same thing at the U.S. Senate. First time out for the U.S. Senate race, it just may be. This is your year.
Well, I think if there's ever a year to retire some establishment politicians who have been there for way too long, this is definitely it. I think people are pretty fed up. They're pretty frustrated, angry, disappointed, disgusted with Washington, D.C. And I think that they see that people who have been there for decade after decade after decade are actually the problem. And so they're looking for a solution. They're looking for new eyes to see the problems. They're looking, really, I'll tell you that the message of liberty and freedom sells across the board, regardless of age, regardless of heritage, regardless really of political ideology. And so I'm glad that I'm carrying that torch of liberty and I'm taking it to Washington.
Well, there's one piece of legislation that I knew about that you introduced in the Arizona Senate, and that is the Fourth Amendment Protection Act, which would rein in the ability of the NSA to run roughshod over our state. So that, to me, is very important. You deserve a lot of compliments on pushing that issue.
Oh, I thank you. What's raining down on me from John McCain and his political allies is a lot of despair and disparagement because of that very act, the Fourth Amendment Protection Act, because unfortunately Senator McCain seeks to get around our Constitution rather than uphold it. And I want somebody that upholds the Constitution serving in the United States Senate. A lot of his attack ads revolve around my support of the Fourth Amendment, and I will always stand up for our right to privacy. And of course, I want law enforcement and I want our intelligence community to get the information that they need to be able to fight crime, to fight terrorism. I simply want them to do it under the Constitution and get a warrant. Get a warrant. It's a simple process, and it protects us and it protects our rights.
Mm-hmm. Well, Daniel is going to ask you a question in a minute, but I do want to mention one thing about your voting record. I noticed that on a few times you were a lone voter. I could identify with that. So congratulations. Yes. When you were willing to stand up on principle. Daniel?
Thank you.
Well, thanks for joining us, Dr. Ward. And I must admit to mixed feelings about your doing so well because, as you may know, I run the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity. We have a little section called Neocon Watch where we'll write about the shenanigans of our favorite neocons. And whenever I put something up about John McCain, it just skyrockets. Our readership goes through the roof. So John McCain, I'm afraid, is very good for business. So I have mixed feelings. But
Right, but like Congressman Gohmert said, he's not good for Arizona, the USA, or the world. So, I think you're going to have to sacrifice a tiny bit of business for the good of the world.
You got a lot of attention earlier this summer when you made the claim. Actually, it was a counterclaim to something McCain said. But you said McCain's foreign policies were directly responsible for the rise of ISIS. And you touched a lot of raw nerves when you said that. But I think it was so important because you brought into focus the critical point for us, which is that our aggressive and assertive and interventionist foreign policy overseas makes us less safe at home, not more safe.
You're 100% right, and that foreign policy, it's an invade the world, invite the world foreign policy that John McCain and Hillary Clinton share. They share it, and they're responsible for it. I will tell you, I had to call him out because we didn't learn from what happened in Iraq when we invaded. We took out a tyrant, that's for sure, but we left a huge vacuum in place that was filled by radical elements. Then we did it again. Libya, Egypt, Syria, and that radicalization continued. And our endless occupation and our nation building has combined to bring terrorist attacks at home. And that's because of the open border policies of John McCain and Hillary Clinton as well. And so it has not made the world a safer place. I ask in most of my speeches, how many of you feel safer now that, since John McCain's been in the Senate for 33 years? And I will tell you that to the person, no one says they feel safer in this world because of John McCain's foreign policy.
This is an important issue, and I talked a whole lot about that when I was in Congress and running in the presidential races. But where do you put this in the scheme of things? I know it's a big issue, but I don't know how big. How big do you find that in your state? Yours tends to be a military state and being challenged. Do you think people care about this? Because I think a lot of times what is portrayed on the media is that nobody cares and just go along with neocons and go along with Hillary and all. What is your sense of what the people of Arizona are thinking when they hear you talk in a non-interventionist manner?
They are excited about that because they are tired of the endless occupations across the world, the inappropriate use of our military across the world. And so we do. I'm a military wife. My husband and I have been married for 21 years. He's been in the military for 32. And so I believe in our military, and I think that we should have a strong military in order to be a deterrent for people to attack us. But our military has been used inappropriately again and again and again. What we need to be concerned about is our safety, our security in the United States of America. And we've gone far afield of that. And Arizonans understand. They want to keep our military bases here. They want to keep our National Guard and our reserve strong because those assets do help our economy. But they don't want to see our men and women sent into conflicts that are unconstitutional and lead to the loss of lives of the future of our country.
And Dr. Ward, you did mention the fact that you're a military wife, and you said that you'll support military engagement overseas only as a last resort and with a constitutional declaration of war. And that's so critical. Dr. Paul and I did a show earlier this week. President Obama just woke up one morning and decided to start bombing Libya again. All of a sudden, we're in an open-ended conflict in Libya, bombing this country yet again. We were supposed to have fixed it last time, and Congress is absolutely asleep on the issue. What would you do if you were in the Senate and you woke up one morning and found the president was bombing somewhere?
Right. Well, you have to call him out. You have to be brave. And I'm sorry, there are not enough fearless men and women that are in Washington, D.C., because so many of them just want to stay in Washington, D.C. They don't propose policies that are good for the people they represent. They put off implementing policies until it can benefit them politically. And I think that's another reason the people of the United States and the people of Arizona are looking for a change. And they're, and I'm glad that they're looking to me because they know I will stand up fearlessly against powerful people. I've done it in the Arizona State Senate. I've had to stand up against our Republican governors. I've served under two, and they are not always right just because they're in the executive branch. Many times they're wrong, and they need to have that legislative branch guidance to put them back on the right track. I look forward to being that check, that balance that we're supposed to have in the Constitution that simply doesn't exist right now.
You know, as important as foreign policy is, I still am assuming that a lot of people in this particular election will be voting for other reasons too, and they may be economics. But even foreign policy is an economic issue because it contributes tremendously. I heard a person on today, a Republican, discussing that, and it was continued to double the size of the military. Never considered, but the main reason he was on the TV was Republicans need to cut something. He says, cut it out of the welfare program. But anyway, I think the economy is important, and I think that it's being talked about to a degree. And we saw what Bernie Sanders did: give everybody something for free, and they'll vote for him. So that is the case. But how do you handle this issue? That if you do agree that there are some problems in the economy, I don't know what the employment rate is in Arizona, but I'd like to know, is there a concern about the economy? The government says there's no inflation. Unemployment is below 5%. So why are you stirring up all this trouble? How do you handle that issue?
Oh, yeah, I do think the economy is one of my big issues that I've been talking about. Remember, John McCain's been in Washington for about 18 trillion of the 20 trillion we're in debt. He is definitely not a guy who's trying to balance the budget or stimulate the economy other than through tax breaks and tax hikes and bailouts. We've got a lot of work to do. We've got to fix the tax code. We've got to shrink the size of government. We've got to get rid of unconstitutional agencies. And we've got to have some growth in government. I mean, we've been basically in the doldrums under Obama, growing at 1.2, 1.4, 1.5%. And then we're letting the media promote his I'll just say inaccuracies, but really they're just downright lies that the economy is growing and that people are happy and that they're employed. It simply isn't the case on the ground, and so we've got a lot of work to do, and that means by shrinking government, lowering the regulations, and letting the free market work, we can have many more Americans who are able to have high-paying jobs and enjoy the freedom of employment rather than the shackles of government dependence, which I think the Democrats, and you mentioned Bernie, they would love everybody to be under those shackles except for a few producers who have to pay for it all.
Right.
Everyone loves a David and Goliath story, and we loved it when, or a lot of us loved it when Eric Cantor was taken down last time by a come-from-nowhere candidate. We're all watching what might happen to Speaker Ryan. There's an insurgency against him as well, could be successful. And I would say you're the third of the kind of David versus Goliath races that we're looking at this time. If you could give us a sense maybe of what the race looks like. Everyone's excited about these races like that. If you can give us maybe a view of your strategy, where you came from, where you're at now, and how you intend to win this race.
The race is going spectacularly. And I'll tell you that when I first got into the race, and it was a little over a year ago now, the John McCain camp came out and said that I was the JV team. They said that I was trying to go from Little League to the Major League, and there was no way a little-known rural Arizona state senator could take on a D.C. dragon like John McCain. And we have definitely proven them wrong. I talked to somebody this morning because, I do a lot of calls right now. And he said we have to puncture the perception of imperviousness of the establishment GOP and the establishment inside Washington. And it has to be done by an insurgent candidate who is significantly underfunded. He said a $1 to $2 million candidate versus a $10 to $20 million candidate. And I said, well, we've got the race right here in Arizona. But our momentum is spectacular. In a head-to-head matchup, Senator McCain and I are tied. What we're seeing on the ground is that people are ready to vote for Kelli Ward. They do not want to vote for John McCain. They just want to know that we have a competent, qualified, capable person ready to take the reins and hit the ground running. And I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go. Okay,
on a follow-up on that, I want to find out how the press has been treating you. I've never felt overly confident how I was treated in the press, but I want to know how they treat you and whether they're pro-McCain. Do they support McCain? They don't like McCain? Do they give you coverage? Do you have any positive press that you get? I know what I ended up doing. I had to rely on, a lot of activity on the internet. But there's not everybody is in the same category, although, the conservative Republican stations and the liberal Democratic stations do come down on the same side of the big issues. One in particular is monetary policy, debt, and foreign policy. So how have they treated you in the press out in Arizona?
Well, some of the press is friendly. Obviously, the more conservative press has been great. Breitbart, Conservative Review, conservative headquarters, those kind of places, it's been amazing. The mainstream media is a little less friendly. I think that the Arizona Republic, which is the big paper in Phoenix, is very pro-McCain. The political writer generally almost appears to be a McCain apologist. Today I saw Senator McCain on one of our local TV shows, and they spent a tiny portion talking about some policy issues, but then they talked about his trip to the Cardinals training camp, and it was a very feel-good kind of interview, kind of like what Hillary's trying to do to prove that she's actually a person. I think Senator McCain is back in Arizona, taking his picture with the cactus, saying a couple of things about the veterans, promising to secure the border in hopes that he'll pull the wool over the eyes of the American people once again and be able to go back to Washington to serve out his 80s. He turns 80 at the end of this month in the lap of luxury in the U.S. Senate. So we're working hard to make sure that doesn't happen. But I am getting some press. I'd like to get a little bit more, but I'll keep pushing it, and I think I will.
Well, that's very, very good, because I think it's so necessary to use what you can. So I am, very pleased with how you're doing, and we have to sort of finish up here. But I did want to ask you a quick question, and I think I know your answer, and that is, if there is a chance to weaken or get rid of the Patriot Act, what is your position?
I think that the Patriot Act sounds like a great thing, because who doesn't want to be a patriot? But it is something that has been misused again and again and again by our government, and it's got to go.
Very good.
It's got to go.
And Kelli, I want to thank you very much for being with us today. And why don't you finish by just mentioning your website?
I will. Thanks, Dr. Paul. My website is kelliward.com. On Twitter, it's Kelli Ward AZ. On Facebook, it's Kelli Ward for Arizona. And you have to remember, it's Kelli with an I, because I am going to be a conservative champion for liberty in Washington, D.C.
That sounds very good, and thanks for being with us. And I wanted to thank our audience for being with us today for this program. I think this is very important that we do let people know about helping to make some changes, and the people in Arizona are trying to make some changes, and I think Kelli's made some pretty good points that maybe 33 years is enough time. But I thought the interesting number that she gave us, Daniel, was the number of what the national debt did during McCain's reign. And I guess maybe Kelli has done this, but I'll bet you during that period of time, McCain never voted against the budget resolution, and he voted for most of the spending. So that'll be it. But I want to thank our audience for tuning in today, and keep an eye on this race in Arizona, so we may have a pleasant surprise down the road. Please come back soon.